Oh my, you guys. I haven't really been doing a whole lot of videos lately. Well, things. I have really been struggling to define normal after my husband's, you know, cancer surgery, additional hospital stays, and struggle to become normal again because he is still dealing and it has increased my workload here. So that's what's going on. I'm just questioning what normal is, what it looks like, and why do I even worry about some of the things here? So, this is not what that's about, but I needed you guys to know before I start my video what's going on and why. Okay, my name is Suzanne Titkemeyer. I used to write for a place called Pathos, a column called No Longer Quivering that was about the quiverful evangelical movement. Was highly critical of it because I lived it for like 18 years and then I left and now I'm back doing this. I wrote about it for 10 years. Took kind of a break because I was burned out and now I'm talking about it again once or twice a week. I try to do it on Tuesday, Taco Tuesday, but we've had some things that have popped up in the last couple days that I just need to talk about. Okay. Now, you may or may not remember last summer, the summer of the Canadian wildfire smoke and everything else going on. I was in suburban Maryland with my kids last year on my birthday, which happened to be the same day that, in the smoke and fuss, the same day that the series Happy Shiny People came out. Okay. And it was the most triggering thing ever. I was watching that my daughter, who was not triggered by it because apparently she's more healed than I am. But that makes sense because she was more of a kid. She was a kid then, and she has a live and let live kind of view of her time there, I think. And has said she's carried out some valuable things, some valuable lessons. And for me, yeah, there's some things I've carried out that are valuable, but most of it is just bad. There's a lot of it that's bad. So let me start this video by saying do not harass or contact anybody I talk to in any way, shape, or form. We're better than going real life with people. And these are just my opinions. Now they are my opinions from years being part of this nonsense, and we know it is nonsense by everything that has happened. So those of you that were living under a rock and didn't watch Shiny Happy People will recognize it as a documentary about the Duggar CULT. It looked at the theology of one Bill Gothard, a really scary guy who the Duggars pretty much hero worshipped and based their entire theology on his teachings. Bill was huge for many years. He ran the IBLP, he did ATI, wisdom booklets galore, Big Sandy family conferences once a year. I never followed Bill. I was never a fan of his, even when I was part of the whole Quiverful world. But I knew so many people at our old church who were, even though I was kind of like, nope, talked in the hand. My husband has told me he visited, well, not visited, he attended a Bill Gothard teaching in New Orleans where he lived at the time and said, oh, it just made a lot of sense. Well, this was before he morphed it into the ATI IBLP pile of toxic. It was when he was still putting the toxic together back in the early 70s, I think it was. So maybe it was a little less toxic then. I would have liked to have had my husband's notes and book from that time. I did have it when I moved to Costa Rica. That was part of the stuff that the Costa Ricans decided to embargo and took away from us was our boxes of books. And that was one of the more painful losses. Okay. So I'm flying blind here about what Bill did before I came on the scene back in like the early to mid 90s with all of this nonsense. So Bill Gothard teaches a very gendered, very toxic, not scientific version of Christianity. And it came out that he himself was accused of being inappropriate with teen girls at his headquarters. And that pretty much cratered and killed his influence. Now, IBLP still exists, but not in the same form it once did. And Bill is stuck in his house, peddling his books out of his house. So there's not a whole lot going on there. And a couple of years ago, I looked and saw Bill had a thing he was selling about kind of dreaming your way to knowledge, where you would read your chapter of the Bible that night and then you would go to bed and dream about it or whatever. And I just laughed when I saw that. It was like, really, dude? That's what you're selling now? And it's a course with levels all the way up to PhD for an organization that has zero legitimate accreditation, just the words of Bill. So, this documentary series on Bill was interesting in so many ways, but one thing that it did was it portrayed something as not so toxic. What was that something? That would be blanket trading. When I saw how Michelle Duggar and others were allowed to gloss over the lie about what blanket trading was, I was horrified. I was talking to my friend Cindy Huntsman about this. We were talking about like WTF, blanket trading? Why are they giving a pass on blanket trading? Blanket trading is the horrific beginning of Michael Pearl's book on child discipline and his theology on it. He wrote a book called To Train Up a Child, where he um, has all these bad ideas. Basically, anything the child could do or does or whatever that you didn't approve of, you would have to have a quarter-inch plumbing line and apply it in a hard hit to the rear end, the legs, to correct bad behavior. So Michelle Duggar claims that blanket trading is how she corrected, got her little children to be quiet on the blanket when she needed to do something. Oh my. And it made it sound like it was just a pleasant time of laying on the blanket listening to music. Not if you look at the books and things that um, Michael Pearl has published about this. And what do I mean by that? Michael Pearl teaches something rather horrific. And if you want to see what that is, go look at my video about it. I'll link it in the description below. I did a video on the heels of this Shiny Happy People because of the fact that they were teaching you to just wail the bejesus out of your child. And blanket training sounded innocuous the way that Michelle Duggar described it, but that's not the reality. The reality is you put out the blanket, you put the baby on the blanket starting between the months 2 and 4, and you grab a switch or a wooden spoon or whatever, something big that makes noise. And this is not big and this doesn't make noise. And you beat around the child for like 5 minutes on the floor, not the child, but around the child. And this is supposed to instill in the child that the idea that this is normal. And they say after you've been doing this, I don't know, a number of weeks, you gradually taking and switching the child's leg just a little bit to get the idea into them that this is normal. This is not normal. People generally do not harm their infants. Infants only have one way of letting their parents know that they have needs: crying. They cry when they're wet, they cry when they're hungry, they cry when they're tired. That's really the primary means of communication for some time for little babies. And punishing a baby for having needs, normal Needs like everybody. It's just setting that child up for all kinds of problems in the future. I'm a believer in that. That's not what I wanted to talk about today. I had to use that to introduce what I'm going to do now. And it was kind of funny because I had been thinking about this because one of my best friends and I were talking the other day. It was my son's 36th birthday. We were talking about his birthday. And she was telling me, oh, I remember when he was born. We were in Germany, blah, blah, blah. And she said, he very seldom cried. And I said, he was just way more relaxed than than his sister. He never cried very much. I was very attuned to him and met his needs right before he might start whimpering a tiny bit. And I'm like snatching him up, dealing with whatever it is. We just had that connection, the two of us. And we've always had a good connection. We're a lot alike in a lot of ways. And his sister came along 3 years later, and it was like hell on wheels. She was very different than him. She was way more tense. She cried a lot more. That's just her personality. Her personality is more type A. His is more type B, like mine. She's more like my husband. And we don't punish children for having needs, regardless of what their personalities are. And I have to throw in here, if you're using James Dobson, well, that's another one full of this ABUSE. So why was I talking about this nonsense? Well, let me see if I can find quickly on X. What brought this up was watching the transformed wife, Lori Alexander, this week try to minimize what blanket training is, okay? She said, quote, purpose of blanket training in young children is to train them to play quietly by themselves for a short while. You know, if that was it, I would have no problem with blanket training. Teaching your child to self-soothe for a small amount of time is never a bad thing. Using physical harm to accomplish that is very wrong. We have small children sitting in our church quietly for an hour and a half. They were trained to do this at home. There's no, quote, hitting, unquote, involved, as many claim. It's training them to have self-control from a young age that will benefit them for life. Self-control can be a good thing. Too much can be harmful. Most children these days have no self-control, and they and society suffer greatly because of it. You know, that sounds like an old lady rant of things were better back in my day. Girlfriend, no, they were not better back in our day. Almost the same age as you. I remember. And when people started giving her pushback, she started arguing with them about it and saying, no, 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 none of that was taking place. Nobody hits. I am here to tell you that is baloney. So I started talking on my ex about, I shared my video. I talked a little bit about blanket training, what it actually involved, and how toxic it is. And I had people going, I had no idea. I thought it was just small children being taught to be content on a blanket. No, 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 no. If that was it, I would have no problem with it. What it actually is just wailing the bejesus out of your child to force compliance. Now, I started talking a little bit about Michael Pearl because Michael Pearl has made the hitting into an art form in his book and on his website. And I was talking about a story I remembered about Pearl that he'd written about a little boy, a toddler. And we all know that toddlers are way worse than babies about not being able to control themselves. Why? Because toddlers are learning and growing. They're testing the world. They're testing their boundaries. And they don't have good anything. They're frustrated many times because they don't have great motor skills like they want to have. They may not even have good communication skills. There's so many different reasons why a toddler has a meltdown. Okay. And as a mother, you learn to manage those things. You learn to, if you have a tired toddler, you swiftly figure out a place for them to nap. If you have a hungry toddler, you feed them. No matter what the need is, you figure out a way to meet it. to completely decompress the child and meet the need. Not in Pearland. Any crying or disobedience is considered to be rebellion. He talks about 6-month-old babies, okay, being sinful and willful. A 6-month-old baby is not sinful and willful. No, not at all. They're learning. They're learning about their world. So this story, I had remembered it that Michael had been the one wielding the switch. I went back last night and took a look, and it was not. It's actually listed right now. Let's see if I can find the name of this piece. Child Training Marathon Revisited and Updated by Michael Pearl. I'm going to have this in the description below as well because I am all about receipts on that crap. Okay. I mistakenly thought it was him, but it was not him. It was the father of the child at the insistence of Michael. So I'm going to read you the part that is just horrific. He's putting down the parents for trying to meet the children's needs, and uh, the toddler, it says here, since the parents were seldom decisive, the child had learned that begging and pleading often caused him to capitulate to his will. When they said no, he knew it just was the starting point in negotiations. No, that's what toddlers do. Okay. And then I skipped a lot. Late one night, we were riding back from a seminar. Well, the little fellow noticed that he was on the other side of the seat from his mother, with other siblings in between them. He was riding in a restraining seat and wanting to sit with his mother in his mother's lap. The father, quote, suggested that would be best. If he stayed strapped into his restraining seat, it would be best to stay in the other seat. The mother began to sympathetically explain why she couldn't hold him. What's wrong with that? Based on past experiences, he knew that this was just the opening round. And then we go on from there. He describes the child whining, complaining, crying. Pretty normal. I don't know why the woman just didn't sit next to the car seat. That's what I would have done before all this happened. There are easy ways to derail all this crap. You don't have to put up with this. So uh, he started advising the father what to do. The father turned to me and asked, what should I do? Again, I explained the principle. By allowing the child to dictate terms through his whining and crying, you're confirming his habit of whining and crying and consenting to his technique of control. So I told Daddy to tell the boy that he would not be allowed to sit in his mother's lap and that he had to stop crying. Of course, according to former protocol, he intensified his crying to express the sincerity of his desires. The mother was ready to come up with a compromise, as well she should. He was hungry, he was sleepy, he was cold. Mother knows best. So Michael says this. Actually, he was a brat, B-R-A-T, bolded and confirmed by parental responses. No, he's a toddler with needs. I told the father to stop the car and without recourse, give him 3 to 5 licks with a switch. Now that sounds innocent, doesn't it? Think about it this way. This is a 1/4 inch plastic plumbing pipe, not meant to use on the tender skin of a toddler's rear end. No. Okay. After doing so, the child only screamed louder. But this was not the time to give in. After 2 to 3 minutes driving down the road, listening to his background wails, I told the father to command the child to stop crying. He only cried more loudly. At my instruction, without further rebuke, the father again stopped the car, got out, and spanked the child. Still screaming, we continued on for 2 minutes until father again commanded the child to be quiet. Again, no response. So again, he stopped the car and spanked the child. This was repeated for about 20 miles down a lonesome highway at 11 p.m. on a winter night. When the situation began to look like a stalemate, the mother suggested that the little fellow didn't understand, told the father to command the boy to stop crying immediately so he would again be spanked. The boy ignored him until father took his foot off the gas, preparatory to stopping the car. In the middle of his crying, he understood the issues well enough to understand that the slowing of the car was a response to his crying. The family was relieved to have him stop, and the father started resuming his drive. I said, "No, you told him to stop crying immediately or you would spank him. He waited until you began stopping. He has not obeyed. He is just beginning to show confidence in your resolve. Spank him again and tell him that you will continue to stop and continue to spank until you get instant compliance." He did. The boy was smart. He may not have feared Mama. His respect for Daddy was growing. But that big, hairy fellow in the front seat seemed to be more stubborn than he was. Michael? Oh, and with no guilt at all. This time, after spanking, when Daddy gave his command, the boy dried up like a paper towel. The parents had won, and the boy was the beneficiary. Oh my, there is a lot going on there. A lot. Just a tremendous amount. And it's also toxic. Again, toddlers are prone to crying. They have needs, just like babies have needs. And just like babies, they can't easily express those needs. So sometimes you're going to see crying, particularly late at night when someone is tired, they haven't had regular meals, regular sleep. They're going to get cranky weird. Shoot, I get cranky weird when I haven't had enough sleep and no meals. It just happens. Meeting your toddler's needs is not stopping the car every 2 minutes to spank them. You don't do that. We just don't do that. We're better than that. That is something that somebody rooted in a punishment system does. There's all kinds of evidence out there. Studies have been done through the years that show that using this kind of punishment on children only does tremendous harm to them in the long run. All you have to do is rewatch the Shiny Happy People or listen to some of the kids talk about some of the discipline they underwent and what it did to them. It does quite a bit of damage. And I'm not talking about physical damage. I'm not talking about welts, bruises, any of that. I'm talking about transferring the idea that might equals right every time, that the biggest, bulliest person wins every time. I'm talking about what it trains a child. It trains them that their needs don't matter. The only thing that matters is daddy's BS, okay? That dad's temper, and mom too, because let's face it, a lot of women do this. If you don't believe me, go to Lori Alexander's website and look for her story where she talked about the Christmas morning where kids got up at break of dawn and opened all the presents without her. And she was so upset. She was spanking them all with her soft slipper, she claims. But who really knows in this group whether it was a soft slipper or a piece of plumbing line or something stronger? And then locked them outside for a few hours. They were all sitting outside. These are young children that this was happening to. Why? Because they did not honor her inner idea about what a Christmas morning looked like. I can hardly believe that somebody is so completely acluistic and just really tied into what their idea is that they want their idea honored above all else. I don't know how she didn't hear because, I know she lives in a big house, but this is ridiculous. In my years with little kids in my household, I always heard when they were up for Christmas. And it was always drag yourself up, make coffee, groan and moan, and watch them open the presents because sometimes it was 5 a.m. when they would get up because they knew Santa had been there. Or if you don't, they didn't believe in that, they knew that presents got put out for them. Somebody inwardly so cruel that they have to have their idea of honored above all else, the type of people that will go ahead and spank a child for having very normal childlike behavior. That's not normal. That is the hallmark of a sociopath, some say. I don't know if that's sociopathic behavior, but I know it's not normal. Please don't do this to your kids. I don't care how much they irk you. One of the things that I used to do when my kids were little, and if they were driving me absolutely nuts and I could feel my temper going haywire, you know what I would do? I would lock myself in the bathroom for a little while. Not for long, 10 minutes was good. Sometimes I'd bring a book. Sometimes I would just be sitting there crying because it would just be too much. There are always better ways to handle your children than this. I've talked about before, I've always loved the Love and Logic series, and I've followed a lot of their teachings with my kids. And I think it's a really good way to do it because you don't want to shut down the curiosity in the world and all of the things that your children absolutely love to explore and do. You don't want to end that. And you sure don't want to abuse them until they become completely numb to the wonder of the world and that they stop being questioning. I used to say my youngest would ask me so many questions, it was just tiring sometimes. And sometimes I would snap and give her a funny answer because I didn't know the answer, like telling her 50,000 times I didn't know what baby oil was made out of, but I thought maybe it was made out of mineral oil and fragrance. And she would, well, what is it made of? What is it made of? One time I said, babies. They press babies to get baby oil. Why do you think they call it baby oil? And then I laughed. I told her later. I was just joking with you about that. You've asked. I've told you what I know about it, and that's how it is. And I get that. There's some kids that are just going to be wired that way. They're going to ask you every question in the book. They think that you are the repository of all knowledge, even when you aren't. And I certainly was not smart enough to be the repository of all knowledge, not even by a long stretch. And it could be a lot. It could be a lot. I struggled as a mother with certain things, but I had sense enough to know that this type of physical punishment is always wrong. Always. Always, 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 always. I think there were one or two times when I did pop somebody on the leg, but one time it was when my daughter tried to run in the street, another time when my son tried to run in the street as a toddler. It was only those horrible, life-threatening circumstances that I ever brought that out, and I didn't do it a whole lot. I swear this the longer I was in evangelical non-denominational how to man group, my group, that I've always called Possum Creek Church. That's what it's called in my book. The more disgusted I was by the people who wanted to physically abuse their children. So there you have it. I am going to go out into my day. I'm dressed for the beach, as you can see. I'm going to go do a beach walk. I'm going to show you this. I laughed over this. I got new lipstick recently. Something that I could do, I could wear that had a little bit of sun protection in it. Gotta look at the name for this one. Skip the gym. Oh my, I don't think we should be telling anybody that, but this is Skip the Gym pink. Slapped when I saw this. So this is going to be a skip the gym day. I'm going to walk the beach and then I'm going to come back and paint. Feel the itch to paint and go into Tamarindo before sunset to catch the sunset and listen to music. Love you guys. Don't take anything as seriously as these people take their own thoughts about harming children. And when you see people saying these things, stand up to them and say, no, that's absolutely not right. This is why you shouldn't. There are tons and tons of resources out there on why you should never spank your child, about the kind of mindset it sets your child up for that I know as good parents, you don't want to inculcate that in your child. Okay, I'm really going this time. Love you guys.